So here's a question that's, well, puzzled people for ages. If there's one creator, one universe, why so many different religions, so many distinct divine laws? You see divisions between Judaism, Christianity, Islam, but often people feel they're praying to the same single God. It's a real puzzle, isn't it? Today, we're taking a deep dive right into that question. We're exploring the meaning of difference, but also unity in divine laws, or Sharai. And our guide is this fascinating text, Shir, which means the one God and the multiplicity of laws. It offers a, well, pretty unique perspective.
Yeah, it really does. Our mission today is to sort of unpack the insights from this text. How does it reconcile one God with all these different practices and laws we see? We'll look at this idea that the differences aren't just random static, but maybe intentional, serving a purpose, and that underneath it all, there's this unified core. So yeah, prepare for maybe a shift in how you see things.
Okay, let's get into it. The source starts off by noting something interesting. A Muslim, a Jew, a Christian. They might sit down and all agree, verbally at least, our deity is God. But then if you look closer at the details, significant differences emerge. And the text even suggests that the image of God, well, in some traditions, maybe didn't stay as pure as it was originally meant to be, that it was altered, things added, things taken away. So how does the source answer that initial puzzle about diversity then?
Well, what's really compelling is how directly the source tackles this. It doesn't shy away from it. It acknowledges that surface agreement, but then, like you said, dives into the specifics. It posits that, yeah, over time, the pure message got impacted. And then it offers this really powerful answer straight from the Quran, specifically verse 48 from Surah Al-Ma'idah.
Right, the source really hinges on that verse.
Where?
What does it reveal? What's the core argument based on it?
Okay, so the verse explains, and I'm paraphrasing from the source here, that God sent down the book, the Quran, with truth, confirming previous scriptures and acting as a guardian over them. It says, "So judge between them by what God has revealed. For each of you we have made a law and a clear way." And here's the key part. "And if God had willed, he would have made you one nation, but he did so to test you in what he has given you. So hasten to all that is good." It finishes by saying, everyone returns to God, who will then clarify all their differences. So from the source's viewpoint, this means the differences in laws aren't mistakes. They're intended. God willed this diversity essentially as a test for us, to see who's sincere, who's devoted in their actions. The call isn't conflict, it says, but actually competing in good deeds. Which makes you think, doesn't it? What does it mean for you if this diversity of paths is part of a divine test?
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The source argues that despite all these variations in laws and practices, the essence of religion is actually one, unchanging. It calls this core the unification of God and submitting one's face to him. Now, that sounds like more than just, forced surrender, right?
Exactly. That's a crucial distinction the source makes. It clarifies that Islam, in this broad, universal sense, isn't about reluctant submission, like under duress. No, it defines it as a willing, heartfelt submission of one's face to God. Think of it like turning your entire being, your mind, your heart, your actions completely towards God, freely, sincerely. And the prime example given is Abraham, peace be upon him, when God commanded him, submit. What did he say? "I have submitted to the Lord of the worlds," just like that. So that submission of the face, it means committing fully to God's commands, avoiding what he forbids, not associating any partners with him, and basically taking no other reference point for your life but his revelation.
Okay, so it's not just saying I believe. It's a whole way of living, really.
Yeah, precisely. It's a practical thing. It covers everything. Fundamental beliefs, yes, but also worship, how you interact with people daily. The source points to that Quranic verse, Al-Baqarah 2.114, about whoever submits his face to God while being a doer of good, they get their reward. It links that sincerity towards God directly with doing good, with excellence in action. So religion becomes both pure worship and refined social conduct, which leads to the question, I suppose. How do you see that link between your own personal beliefs and your ethical actions day to day?
So if the core essence is one, unchanging, how do we explain the practical differences, not just in the big laws, the Sharia, but even specific acts of worship, the ibadat, things people do? Are these contradictions or part of some bigger plan?
Right, that's the next logical step. And the source offers this really compelling view. The divine laws, the Sharia, were diverse. They were tailored, to the specific circumstances, the needs, the conditions of different nations at different times. But, and this is key, their main goal, their overarching purpose, was always the same: unifying God and refining human beings. The how might have varied, but the why stayed constant. For example, the source mentions the Sabbath for the Jewish tradition, a specific test, a specific focus. It talks about Christian tradition, emphasizing asceticism, more see different focal points again. Then Islam, according to the text, arrives as the comprehensive, the final, the explanatory message. It sort of brings everything together, representing the last stage in this progression of guidance. It's presented not as contradictions, but as stages, like steps leading up to the final, complete message.
That makes sense for the broader laws. But what about the really specific acts, like, say, prayer or fasting? Did those change too?
Yes, indeed. The source actually details how acts of worship, the ibadat, also showed some variety initially, before kind of settling into their final, comprehensive form within Islam. Take prayer, salat. The text mentions there were early discussions or differences about the number of daily prayers, some suggesting 3, others 5. But this eventually settled on 5, based on divine revelation and the Prophet Muhammad's guidance, peace be upon him, who famously said, "Pray as you have seen me pray."
Okay, so a convergence there too.
Exactly. And the source argues this convergence wasn't random. It ensures, complete fulfillment. If accountability was based on 3 prayers, praying 5 covers it. But if it's 5, praying only 3 falls short. So adhering to the Quran and the Prophet's specific teaching became the guarantee. And prayer isn't just seen as ritual, it's a pillar, a symbol of unity for Muslims everywhere. Preserved, the text emphasizes, by continuous practice, generation after generation, not just written words.
Interesting. And does it mention other acts of worship following a similar pattern?
It does. It touches on others too, like fasting, some. A whole month, Ramadan, was set for this intensive spiritual training tied specifically to the lunar cycle, the sighting of the new moon, and pilgrimage. Described as this duty that physically gathers the entire Muslim nation, a unified spectacle with specific starting points like Yom al-Tarwiyah, a shared global event. Then there's zakat, charity. The source highlights that its specific rules weren't just for social welfare, but profoundly for purifying the self and one's wealth. It even uses that Quranic example of a dying person wishing they could return just to give charity, showing its deep spiritual weight.
Wow. So this idea of evolution and then convergence in both laws and specific practices, how does that progression really hit home the idea of a test and refinement for you personally? What does it suggest about our own growth?
Well, I think it suggests it's not just about blind obedience, right? It's a process, a challenge to humanity to engage with guidance as it unfolds, maybe, to discern the underlying truth, to separate sincerity from just going through the motions. And it's about finding that unity within the diversity, recognizing the single source even when the expression changes. It really asks how you respond when truth is revealed in stages, adapting to fuller understanding.
Okay, so bringing it all together. After looking at these layers of diversity, unity, laws, practices, what's the final take from the source on our original big question? One God, many religions. It feels like we keep coming back to a central point.
We do, and that's exactly what the text does. It concludes by strongly reaffirming God is one. The essence of religion is one pure monotheism, that willing submission of the face to God, no coercion involved. It repeats that the differences in laws had a purpose. They were a test, a way to guide people through stages leading up to Islam as the final, comprehensive, and in its view, superseding message.
But it also addresses the issue of distortion, doesn't it?
Yes, that's a critical point it makes. It argues that humans, while sometimes messed with the original message, changed things. From the text perspective, it mentions specifically that traditions within Judaism and Christianity came to attribute sons to God, or took rabbis and monks as lords besides God. And the source sees these as distortions of that original pure monotheism that was meant to be the absolute core.
And how does it position Islam in contrast to that?
It presents Islam as this comprehensive witness, holding on to that pure creed unifying God, but also having worship that refines people, laws that organize life justly, and ethics that elevate human dignity, a complete package, essentially.
And it really stresses the consistency of practice, too, as you mentioned, with prayer.
It absolutely does. That point about the 5 daily prayers, fasting, Ramadan, zakat, Hajj, being performed the same way across the globe, generation after generation, someone in the farthest east praying just like someone in the farthest west, no difference, no contradiction. For the source, this is proof of a preserved universal practice transcending place and time.
So the ultimate message seems to be
that religion isn't just about labels or slogans. It's about sincere devotion to God, that willing submission, and then crucially, competing in good deeds. And it circles back to the idea that all the prophets, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, peace be upon them all, they all called to the same fundamental thing: Worship none but God, associate no partners with him, don't take others as lords besides God. That's presented as a universal thread, which prompts a final thought, perhaps. How does considering this universal message affect your perspective on truth in faith, especially when you encounter so many different beliefs?
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground today, taking a really illuminating deep dive into this ancient and profound question. The idea that diversity in divine law isn't necessarily contradiction, but maybe an intentional test, leading to this core unity of purpose and essence. That's a powerful way to look at it. It gives you a lot to think about.
It really does. And the source is clear. Those differences in laws aren't about saying one is fundamentally wrong in its time, but that they served a purpose within a larger plan, a challenge. And ultimately, as the verse says, everyone returns to God, who will then inform you about that over which you used to differ. He'll set the record straight, placing everyone justly. It suggests this grand design, behind what looks like scattered paths, all leading to a final resolution.
So, building on all that, here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. What does it truly mean in your own life to submit your faith, to fully commit to something you profoundly believe in? And how do your daily actions, your interactions with others, actually reflect that commitment, especially living in a world that's just brimming with diverse beliefs and interpretations?